but no individual has been a leader. And that's the key, so you're absolutely right. If I'm the best player in whatever sport, in whatever country, I alone, because I'm the best, I'm not a leader, right? Leading takes other people that support me and I support them. And so this idea of, what does it mean to be a leader? It's actually realizing, this idea of shared success.
Hey, Shorty. Wow, fantastic. Here we are in the studio again. Got a pretty awesome guest to chat to today. How have you been? It's been a crazy, crazy world. How's life in COVID been treating you, Sean?
Mate, it's not too bad, actually. It started off as a bit of a speed hump, and then things have really accelerated from there. So we've actually done really well. We've actually grown quite well, and most of the clients we're working with in business owners are starting to pop out the other side, I think, in a really positive way, which is great to see as well. So.
It's unusual, isn't it? It's been interesting when we look at some of the people that we've spoken to and stayed connected with. Most of them have just seen COVID as a minor speed bump. Some people have taken it hard outside of the community we speak to, but within the community we're involved in, we're seeing people thrive right now. And our guest today, geez, I tell you what, it's hard to find a succinct way to introduce him, is Wesley Payne McClendon. Wesley, thanks so much for coming and joining us here today.
Great to be here.
Now, Wesley, you've been a busy man. You've lived a very full life indeed, and you've obviously got you don't have an Australian accent like myself and Sean. You hail from the US. You've had the opportunity to mingle with the likes of Bill Clinton. You've carved yourself a little bit of a niche in the performance and strategy side of things. And I'll tell you what, mate, doing a bit of research on you and having a look at the accomplishments that you've achieved, including your book, which we'll talk about in a moment. There are a few key themes there and some stuff that I really resonated with me, and really specifically now when we're looking at these hybrid remote and local teams. You talk a little bit about leaders surrendering control. What sort of limitation is that for leadership in this day and age? Trying to maintain the level of control over their teams and staff that they used to when they had that physical environment.
Look, I think control is one of those things that's an outdated approach to leadership. So I think most people kind of think control means leadership. And in fact, giving up control is a better way to describe what leadership is all about. Where most people think about feeling, touching, and being engaged face to face with their teams and their organizations in this new environment, that's just not possible. So it's almost like you have to give up control and cultivate this environment of trust that allows people to do their job. And your role as a leader is just to ask how you can support them.
Trust seems to be a recurring theme at the moment with remote teams, and also potentially COVID has highlighted some deficiencies inside organizations. What are some of the trends you're seeing with your clients around this really generational disruption, and what are some of the key lessons learned that people can take from this situation right now to thrive over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Like in many ways, you almost have to throw out the old playbook because it simply doesn't work in this environment where people are used to, as I said, being face to face with the teams and the organizations that they work with. It's almost as if you have to say, look, that is the old way. And looking ahead, we're going to have to figure out new ways of working that involves people working remotely, although people have always worked remotely. But this kind of crystallizes what the new ways of working will be, where teams will be working remotely. In fact, in the way we look at performance, that needs to take a second stage in terms of allowing people to manage their own performance and focus on outcomes as opposed to processes. So it's really a new day. But to my mind, it's a really incredible opportunity for folks to actually look inside and say, well, what is it about my leadership that I need to change? Engage with the team to find out what about your leadership they like or dislike, and make those appropriate changes to meet their needs. Because again, leadership, it's not about me, it's about you.
And so would you say, Wesley, that let's say, imagine that tomorrow the COVID disappeared. Do you feel things are going to go back to, let's say, normal? Or do you feel that this is now the new normal? Teams are going to choose to have people offsite now as a part of their standard process, not demanding people to come into large, multi-story offices and things like that. What's your take on the new landscape?
Yeah, look, it is a new normal. And so, everything from Twitter and Google and others have actually decided that we're going to let people work from home for the foreseeable future, because there actually is, I mean, again, being a new normal, the idea of a team meeting isn't all gathering in the conference room and sharing coffees and donuts. It's actually being in your normal life, which is typically at home, but allowing that personality of your home and yourself to be authentic and to be who you are, which I think adds a wonderful dimension to our work lives blending. So it's no longer about work-life balance, it's life balance. And the idea that you're able to come in and out, given your circumstances, your situation, your domestic duties and responsibilities, allows people to see more of yourself. So I think it's just the new way that we're going to have to focus on getting together. It's funny living here in Torquay, where all of a sudden the environment is blown up, where people have now realized because they can work from home, they're going to move to where they want to be. 12 years ago, I moved to Torquay thinking this is where I wanted to be able to work from home. And it's only now.
The sea change has really accelerated. Regional suburbs and cities are absolutely.
And it truly has, because we now realize that we don't have to go into an office. And if I don't have to go into an office, I'm going to live where I love, as opposed to working so I have a short commute to an office where now I don't have to be.
And I've got I live up here in Noosa in Queensland, and I was speaking to an agent the other day, and I said, it's a bit crazy at the moment. She said, yeah, I put a property on for a rental property, for example, at 10 o'clock, and she had 22 applications within less than 2 hours.
Yep.
Because so many people are going, and I like the expression, I can't remember who said it, but I heard somebody say it's work-life integration. Because balance is something that always sways back and forth, but integration is actually making it part of. And it's funny how, imagine 12 months ago, if you're on a Zoom call at work and someone's dog was barking in the background or their kid was scratching at the door, or maybe the other way around. Now it's just like people don't even notice. It's just
all the doors open in the background.
I know. I teach class on a Monday and a Wednesday night from 6 to 9, and I say to my students, look, I understand. You've got your partner who's made your dinner and he's putting it in front of you, or your kids are, playing tag behind you. That's just the new normal. So, as long as, they're not bothering you, they're not bothering me.
People
it just shows you the construct. It's just a construct, what we believe an organization should look like. It's completely, it's like a company. It's just something that we've made up. It's not actually real. It's just this ethos. And Sean and Wesley, I know yourselves as one of the few, the embodiment of that. Like me, you would have probably not had an office for years. And when you get an office, you think, oh, I've got a new company, I'll get a team, have an office. You probably drop in there for the first couple of weeks, and then that's it. You're never in there again. You're on the phone. And another key point you made, Wesley, and I absolutely love it because I rarely hear it, is outcome-focused activity. An effect, a desired outcome, and just letting people get on with it. And this is where I see this first opportunity forever since business was invented for people just to go, hey, work from home. This is what I need you to achieve in the next week. Do you agree? We collaborate. We agree that we can both achieve this, and then just get on and do it. This is transformational stuff, and it's happening incredibly quickly. Do you think that leaders are grasping it, or do you think they're struggling?
Look, I think for many leaders to feel they have purpose or relevance, they get into the minutia of managing process. And instead, what they need to do is take a step back and allow people to do their job, do what they've been hired to do their best, and to provide you with the outcomes that are required. Again, I know of a situation where I was managing, or actually mentoring, a former CFO who had been promoted to be a CEO. Now, he was a CFO, and so he had extensive knowledge of the financials. And the person behind him came up and had been promoted into that CFO role. Make a long story short, as much as I coached and mentored him to lead the organization and not be focused on the minutia of the CFO role, which he was quite comfortable with and knew, he couldn't do it. So he continued to get into the detail of the CFO role instead of leading the organization. And a year later, he was let go. Again, the idea of being busy and micromanaging and feeling relevance because you're involved in the day-to-day management is not being a leader. They can do that all on their own. You need to be focused on how you can support people, how you can remove obstacles, how you can become a visionary where people look to you to align their purpose with yours to find a common purpose, as opposed to be focusing on the ins and outs of the detail of a process.
I think one thing that I've observed too, was to sort of add to what you're saying there, is that leadership, say within a small business environment, small to medium business environment, I think those individuals, the business owners, and in smaller environments, the managers and leaders within those teams, they're at a massive benefit here to people from the large corporate companies, and you used the word before, in passing, control, Boo, when you said, a control versus, letting go of control is actually leadership, and control is micromanagement. But I believe a lot of these bigger companies, they have the framework of an organization looks like this because it is about controlling people to be in that box. So do you feel that shift is going to be harder for the larger organizations to make, particularly the old school, very kind of structured ones, not so much your Googles and Facebooks?
Yeah, look, I think it will be difficult because many of those large organizations, for their own benefit of, a whole bunch of reasons, but the bottom line is they're flattening out. Organizations don't find hierarchy is of any benefit other than to have a title. In terms of how an organization actually functions, it's actually quite flat. And this idea of working remotely has reduced that hierarchy even more, because people don't have the ability to wait for a decision from him or her, and then him or her to do this now here where I am. And I don't have the time or resource to be able to go up the chain of command in order to get a decision, to come back down the chain of command in order to get started. So I think organizations are flattening. They're moving more laterally in terms of both promotion and responsibility. And so the idea, I have a budget and I don't need to impact, on what you're doing, because I can function, with the resources that I'm able to need to complete a job or, achieve an outcome.
What would you say the three key skills that people now need to develop to actually be able to adapt to this new approach, the flattening of the structures and
execute, get out of this whole pattern, and actually get things done?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing is to both internally and externally communicate your purpose. I think above all, that's the most important piece, because I think it allows you to establish, what's most important to you, and thereby communicating that to the people that you work with. Again, allowing them to latch on to create a common purpose in which they can both work together. And so you don't need to get into the minutia of managing objects or things or processes. You actually allow them to lead a purpose, a common or shared purpose together. So that's the first thing. I think that's the most important. The second, I think, is this idea of being able to cultivate an environment of trust, where you're talking more about principles of engagement, principles of how we work together, principles of expectation, and trusting those people that you've hired or are in roles to do exactly that, to focus on those outcomes. So again, this notion of cultivating trust. And I think the most difficult piece, as we've just talked about, is letting go and allowing this notion of control to be flipped on its head. And letting go means allowing people to be the best at what they do. In as much as a leader, you feel this level of importance and knowledge and capability, when the best leaders that I've worked with have decided actually they're not good at this particular thing, and they've identified those people who are, and they let them get on with it. The worst thing you can do is try to control and, in a way, strain the best people from doing their best work. So that notion of letting go and letting control go, I think, are the third of the three top things that I would encourage people to focus on.
Well, we've seen a big theme, haven't we, Boo, in these conversations that we've had on The Few, where it seems to always end up going back to the baseline of purpose. And
everything. It's the
everything's coming. It's the why.
Like, not what.
Get rid of the what or the how, but why the heck are you doing it in the first place?
I just ran a planning session this morning for a huge organization, and the challenge for them to think in terms of purpose in a big organization, that, well, we just do what we're told. Okay, but but if you didn't exist, what would not happen then? Don't think about what you do. Think about what wouldn't happen if you're not here. If a bomb went off in this room, what would not get done? And they're like, oh, this and this and this. It's like, okay, and do you think that would be bad for everyone? Oh, it'd be horrendous. And the whole organisation come to its knees. Okay, if you think about it, your purpose is pretty important, right? What you do is actually critical. And they're like, yeah, it is. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. And then all of a sudden, the room ignited, and the detail, which is still important, right? You need to do the detail. Your team does the detail, not the leader. And all of a sudden, everyone just got excited, because they connected with something that was here. And a little bit of soul as well. So that's great. So and it's something I really want to have a chat to you now, Wesley, because clearly people, groups of people trying to work together at a strategic level, at a granular level. So tell us about you. What was this where you thought you would be right now in life when you started thinking about, Wesley, hey, I need a job, I need to put food on the table, back when you were a teenager?
Well, to be honest, yes, because at 15 I wanted to get a PhD. And the reason why is I didn't know what it was. I just knew it was the highest you could get from an academic perspective. And growing up on the south side of Chicago, you have a couple of different ways you can get out. You can get out by sports and entertainment, or you can get out with your head. And I figured, I was a decent ball player and I could do some things that folks couldn't do, but I knew that was going to have a limited shelf life. And so I figured I could use my brain a lot longer. And so, like I said, I wanted to get a PhD when I was 15. I think what really changed it for me was this idea of wanting to be an expert in my field, but to leverage what I knew to help others, help themselves. And so that piece I figured out early on, and I continue to do that. That's my purpose. It's combining all of these things as a musician from the south side of Chicago, an academic, a thought leader, a mentor, a coach, an executive, an advisor to boards, all of that stuff. But I want to use that to help others help themselves. And so it's that combination of being able to use all that to illustrate this big picture where people can see themselves and how they fit in, I think is the most important thing for me. But I actually wanted to do this a long time ago.
Did you have that sense of service as a teenager that you wanted to be an educator? Were there people around you? Was there something that happened? What was it, apart from progressing out of a particular social demographic? Was there other motivators that made you choose brain? How did you even learn the concept of a PhD at 15? Were you inquisitively minded? Where did it all sort of gel for you, staring at the ceiling in your bedroom one night?
Yeah, no. So my mom was a school teacher, a grammar school teacher. My dad was a cop. And so I got this learning bug from my mom and this kind of protective need from my dad. But he was also a jazz musician, which is why I studied music composition and orchestration at Columbia. So that allowed me to tap into that piece after he died my senior year of high school. But I think it was, early on, I think it was about 8 or 9 years old. My parents came to me. I was actually playing the piano and they sat on either side of me and they said, we want you to take a test. And I said, okay. And so I went and took this test at this very old school. I think it was a couple of days. And then they came back to me sometime later and said, you're going to leave the public school and you're going to go to the University of Chicago Laboratory School. And all of a sudden, my friends went from being all Black and in my neighborhood to white and Jewish and mixed and from other parts of the world, from Asia, from Brazil. And so my life literally changed in an instant. And they were all way smarter than I was, which gave me this environment, not to compete, but I wanted to be like them. Where clearly I was using my brain. I was getting A's in school, in public school, but I wasn't being challenged. At the University of Chicago, I was challenged, and people didn't even try to be smart, and they were smart. That wasn't me. I had to try. But that environment really inspired me and made me realize that it was more than just being an athlete. I think you can be an athlete and an entertainer and have some head. But what I figured out, again, in the early age, which is why by the time I was 15, I said, I want to get a PhD, is because I realized that was the way in which I could have long-term success and leverage what I knew to, again, help others.
That's incredibly early, as I've seen for someone to, I guess, with working with many, many thousands of business owners over the years, and myself included, that a lot of times, particularly for us males, we'll go through a very ego-driven period first, when it's very self-serving, it's very, do stupid stuff and all the rest of it, whatever people do.
Yeah, academics
and until we actually realize that we're just being a bit of a moron and we need to pull our finger out and go, you know what? It's not actually all about me. The world doesn't
having a cop in your household negates that.
That helps. So that's incredible. And again, that's the reason why Boo and I came together to do The Few is the concept of The Few is that how do people become one of the few that's actually living their life's purpose?
What's the trigger? Where are the influences? Is it that old nature or nurture thing? But so let's go back, Wesley, because you touched on a couple of issues there in terms of color and creed, and coming out of the south end of Chicago. Obviously, it's very prolific now with Trumpism. And we're seeing this galvanization into two camps where we're starting to see racism bubble up. Again, sometimes Sean and I get ourselves a little bit in the deep end with people because we can't really speak from that perspective. But we'd just like to open that conversation. Now, you've had your own experiences with police before that were problematic. No doubt your dad had a few stories as well as to what happened. What's it like being black in the US of A and globally? And what are your thoughts on the Black Matters movement?
So being black in America has everything to do with where you are and how you're perceived. So if I had grown up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I was baptized, I would have had a very different life. Had I grown up in Southern California, I'd probably have a very different life as well. But the one thing that is constant, and my mom, when I was finished with my first doctorate, and she said, you may have a PhD, but you're still black. And she used a different word to describe that. And she was right in getting me to understand that even though you have education, you have experiences around the world, you're still black wherever you go. You can be white or Jewish or Muslim or anything. And I think you can almost, in many cases, get away, depending on your hue, how people receive you when they see you. People have a distinct response when they see me, whether that's a woman pulling her purse closer to her in an elevator when I step on, or someone walking on the other side of the street, or being stopped, driving a convertible, with an earring in my ear and a baseball cap on backwards. Whatever people see is what they respond to. So realizing that and the work that I've done around the world, I've always had an understanding, a recognition of what that is for other people. And often, I put it out there for people to recognize that I'm okay with you realizing that I'm an African American. So I do everything from make a joke about it. I think I've done that already. But the idea is that I want to make sure people are comfortable with me knowing that I'm black and I'm black. And so we can move to something far more important so we can get that out of the way.
Call the elephant in the room. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Which is a conditioned frame anyway. It's like, what's just so, for me frustrating is the fact that it's purely just conditioning, just like any other conditioning or any judgment or any label of any race or creed or religious belief or whatever it is. But how does it, like growing up, so when you were younger, when you started to observe that response, like actually really understand that, oh, that person's responding to me because I'm black, how did that make you feel?
I think I didn't understand it initially, because growing up on the south side of Chicago, all I knew was black people. Bizarrely, our pastor in our church was white, Pastor Piquel. And then subsequently, the following pastor, Pastor Sneed, was white. So I had seen white people. I'd interacted with white people. I didn't have a feeling about them one way or the other. It wasn't until I got to the lab school, the University of Chicago Lab School, and realized that this was different. People, now they didn't look at me as being an African American. It wasn't until I came home that people teased me for going to this school, teased me for, being the smart dude, those types of things. So it was actually more my own community, labeled me as somewhat of a sellout because I had moved on to get an education. And so it was a combination of that and then having, progressed academically and into the corporate world where I realized that, this was not going to be easy. And I think what made it even more difficult, and I've seen this in Australia as well, where having an education, with several graduate degrees doesn't necessarily put me in good stead as it would in the U.S. In the U.S., it's the way out. Education isn't actually looked upon that way in Australia. I think it's more, it's good, it's cool, but what's more important in Australia is actually relationships and mateship and those types of things that an education doesn't necessarily provide an equal alternative in assessing people's worthiness for roles or friendship or otherwise.
You mentioned before about coming home and being ostracized and teased and brought down. It's a very animalistic part of the human genome, I guess, and it's something that many people who are the few that live their purpose, that live their destination and the lives they choose for themselves. It's a trait you almost need to become very comfortable with, isn't it? And this, we call it tall poppy syndrome here.
Yes, indeed.
In Australia. Yeah. But I believe it exists in humanity everywhere. I think.
I think for me, and I lived in the UK and London for 5 years, and in Edinburgh for a couple of years as well. But what's so interesting about it is it's a gang mentality, where we want everybody to be the same. If you've got a blue leather jacket, well, then I need to get a blue leather jacket as well. And so that was less about me being Black and more about me doing something that they weren't doing for themselves. They would have preferred to hang out and do whatever they were doing. And so it was only the extent to which I was doing something different than they were doing that made me an outcast. So when I'd go play basketball, which I literally would do every day, I want college boy, I want frat boy because I joined a fraternity. So it was all of these things that, it was trying to make me feel small, but they knew me since, the beginning of time. So they knew who I was. It was just a way of calling out that I'm different to them because my experiences were different than theirs.
And you're right. That's that herd mentality of something different poses a potential threat.
Correct.
And yeah, we do see that a lot. So
translate that now, Wesley, into, let's go back to our original conversation here, because you really are a scholar and a mentor in organizational leadership and culture, strategic HR being a enabler for a business rather than just be the check and balance and the thing you have to have because legislation says you have to have it. What are these human traits? What are the human traits that aren't the few, that are self-limiting and the challenges that leaders have to overcome? And one of the things I see is this artificial harmony where we see leaders coming down to the level below and participating they confuse collegiate in terms of, well, I've got to be collegiate, therefore I can't be a leader. I'm a manager and I have to be the same as everyone else. What is it about our inherent humanness that is a weakness in a large organization when we look at it in terms of achieving goals and being successful?
Look, I think I mentioned it before. I think there's a fear in some circles that leaders believe they need to be something that they're not in order to be a good leader.
And what about failing? What about failing as a leader in there?
Well, look, I think failure is probably the best thing that a leader can experience. In fact, the more the failure, the better. It's not how you fail, it's how you pick yourself up. But I think what leaders tend to believe is that there is a script that I need to follow. I need to go to the manager's happy hours so that I can feel like I'm hanging out with the boys or the girls, as opposed to saying, actually, I don't drink. I don't like going out to clubs. But hey, let's, go play whatever game in the park, or let's just, go do a Bach on the park type of thing, whatever it may be. And I guess this notion of being authentic is really important to talking about who you are and what's important to you, back to the notion of purpose, so people can see who you are, as opposed to this artificial alternative version of yourself that isn't you. And, when push comes to shove, or in the context of crisis, you are who you are. As I say in the article that I wrote, 7 Habits of Leaders in Crisis, crisis doesn't, turn you into something else. It just reveals who you are. And so, given the choice of being who you are and being someone else, just be who you are. If you don't like going to clubs or happy hours or whatever, that's okay. That doesn't make you less of a leader. It just makes you an authentic person that believes what you believe, and you get on with it.
I think one of the good traits, the strong traits that I've seen from leadership is the ability to say no rather than just saying yes. Because too often we say yes to things that, it's to please endemic. Somebody else.
The bigger the organization, the more yes you see it. You just manage chaos. And that same old excuse matrix comes out, which is, well, I said yes, but due to circumstances beyond my control is now no. When it was a no in the first place. And we had this saying in the Air Force. I probably said it before. I never remember. Got no memory. Yeah, credibility, years to earn and only a few seconds to lose. And goes Absolutely. Back to your crisis point there, Wesley, in terms of the minute a leader lies or covers something up, everyone in the room sees it. Like you cannot hide it. But for some reason, middle managers probably, especially the career middle manager, I guess, I think that's one of the biggest breakthroughs you can make as a leader, is to admit your mistakes and admit your failures, and allow everyone around you to do the same. Absolutely.
And in fact, we won't get into political debates, but I think one of the things that has been really interesting about the situation in the U.S., it's an issue where managing or leading by fear has really, been under a microscope to the level that I've never seen before. I mean, everyone at some level doesn't fear leaders, but they respect leaders. If you look at sports teams, which I've played sports, the idea is that, leadership is a matter of respect, not fear. I didn't, as captain, of the football team, I wasn't feared. I was respected. And so the idea of me, making a call, asking somebody to step back or asking someone to do more, they didn't do it because they feared me. They respected my opinion. Others backed me up. And so it was a matter of not just me leading, but hopefully saying what others thought, and I was their voice. And I think that's what leadership is about. And so the idea of, people, demanding people to do certain things or whatever the case may be, I think it's less about fear and more about respect. And again, we'll say it once again, back to the notion of purpose, because if we're leading by purpose, my purpose becomes your purpose. We share our purpose, but we have to articulate that and have that communication between one another to know exactly what that is. And you'd be surprised because, when I talk about purpose, I'm talking about a deep commitment that motivates my thinking, my decisioning, and what I do. And it permeates everything I do. And so, when we think about what a purpose is, sometimes it's articulated, sometimes it's not. But, you can see somebody's purpose is, winning at all costs. And so in a leadership position, you actually see people who literally will run over their grandmother's grave. They will compete at everything that they do, but they're not doing it from a position of humility. They're doing it from a position of trying to win at all costs. And that's not what you want your leaders to do. That's not what you want their purposes to be about. And therefore, you can make a decision to opt in or opt out of organizations that have individuals that lead with those types of purpose.
I'll tell you what, talking about PhDs, how many academics are going to pick over Trump's presidency in terms of leadership style, in terms of influence? One of the real challenges with kids and being a leadership mentor and coach is trying to talk to positive leadership traits and characteristics, whilst the leader of the free world is the complete opposite. What effect do you think this is going to have on society, Wes?
Oh, look, I mean, clearly he will be studied by, psychologists and other mind-bending people all over the world. But I think he has, opened up a scab that, has been sitting there just not being able to heal. So I don't think Trump has done anything that wasn't already there. He just made it okay to do it. Back in the day, the Ku Klux Klan wore, a white hood, a white cape, and would never reveal their identity. Well, now they just walk around in T-shirts and jeans and spew nonsense. I think not Trump himself, but what he has allowed people to feel comfortable doing has really changed the dynamics around race in the U.S. It's made it okay for somebody to walk up to me, literally spit in my face. And it happened when I was 15 years old. I was sitting on the bus stop with my then girlfriend, and, a pickup truck stopped at the stoplight, and, a guy was looking at me, had his arm out. And then as the light turned green, he spit at me. And it hit me. And I remember, I ran track, so I was pretty quick. And I think I scared them because I was able to catch up. I wasn't able to do anything once I got there. But Trump has made that okay. And that type of leadership makes those types of decisions about who they are, about their feelings, about other people, those types of things. He's made it okay. And I think that's problematic. So it's less about Trump and more about Trumpism.
But as a leader and as an individual, for one person to unlock hundreds of millions of attitudes, you see this throughout history in various empires. Typically, expansionist empires are run by psychopaths and megalomaniacs, right?
Narcissists as well. Yeah.
So you see this, but as much as it's Trumpism, but at the end of the day, he, as one person, created it by being a leader, a figurehead, and espousing, or not probably espousing a view, but allowing a view, not stamping it out, right?
And I think that's the case. He made it okay to be who we already were. Like I said, I don't think there's any more or less racism in the U.S. than there was prior to Trump. He just made it okay. I mean, in 2011, he said that Barack Obama wasn't born in the U.S. And I would imagine people looked around and said, wow, really? I guess he wasn't born in the U.S. And it just grew and it grew. And it was okay to not only think that, which perhaps people did, but it was now okay to say that. It was okay to beat the drum about that. And so by the time that he ran for office, and just before, I believe he either took office or I think it was just before he took office in December of 2016, he actually said, okay, no, he wasn't born in Kenya. He's an American citizen. But he had said prior to that, I sent my team down to Hawaii and they found all of this stuff about Obama. They didn't find anything. Again, so it was about, right now, I think the biggest fear that Republicans have is not Trump, but it's his Twitter account. With 88 million followers, one tweet from the president of the United States could literally end someone's political career. And so I think, again, it's back to fear. People don't fear Barack Obama. They respect and admire Barack Obama. And that's a very different position of leadership, which is why wherever he goes, he is well loved and respected and admired. Trump is feared, and he's created a kind of furious populism, where people have absolutely lost their minds. And I'm going to be interested to see what happens, what role he plays going forward. in terms of whether he says he's going to run in 2024, thereby effectively freezing the nomination process for everyone else. What role he takes in society, whether that's running a news agency or being a pundit on an existing news program. It's going to be really interesting. But the idea is that Trumpism is around fear. And for leaders, as you mentioned earlier, around our kids looking at leadership and what leadership should be about, I would suggest that that's not the type of leadership that I would espouse.
It's the most extreme version that I see of irresponsible leadership, because as a leader, you need to control the narrative. Now, obviously, he's doing it. He's controlling the narrative, and I'm certain it's on purpose for a particular way, but it's actually not in a positive way. And if we take that lesson and apply it to organizations and small businesses, the leadership style, as you say, it can't be fear-based. It's got to be one built on respect, which means that you have to be really, really careful with everything that you say. And one of my past mentors, years ago, taught me a little expression that he said, every conversation is a negotiation. And whenever you open your mouth, you're negotiating something. You're having an impact. You're influencing somebody's decision. So your choice is you can either influence someone or you can manipulate somebody. It takes the same action.
Right.
It's the intent behind that action that delivers whether you get a positive response or a negative response. So, that's really is an extreme example of, one side. And it's like, if you take that lesson and effectively apply it to your business and reverse it, then you're probably going to turn up as a pretty good leader in your organization.
Yeah, the last thing I will say about Trump is whatever he's doing, he's very good at his job. Yeah. He's very good at it.
I think social media, though, I think the world has moved to contain. And I think I would imagine what would have happened if Twitter didn't tag every one of his posts saying that this is a disputed fact. This is not, here's a link to find out some real information about this. So I think that's also been some positive changes there within the social media space as well.
I think so. Yeah.
Which is, God forbid if that thing just kept running completely unfettered. So you spoke about examples for kids. So when you were a kid, no doubt your father was a major role model for you, but who outside of your family were the key influences and why?
Look, I'd probably say, kind of based on what I read, people like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, so these are folks that I read about.
And was it because of what they did or because of their attachment to their purpose?
I mean, I couldn't have described or knew what purpose was when I was that young, but I, in understanding, based on what I read, the impact that they had on people's lives, and again, how people honored and respected and admired their lives, that really kind of channeled my energies, towards that type of thinking, that type of involvement in the community, that type of, wanting to be something more than just a kid that, played basketball or baseball or football, and instead wanted, look, when I was 8 years old, I became a Cub Scout, and that was because I wanted to do something more, became a Boy Scout and went through that whole process. Volunteers for Literacy, Volunteers of America. So I did all of these things, not because I wanted to be better or more than anyone else. I just wanted to do something that allowed me to share whatever gifts that I had with other people. And so that kind of became what I would do, but I wouldn't necessarily talk about it. It's just those things that I did that, effectively went under the radar that probably helped to form, who I became over time.
Would you say it's also because, the no way of saying the purpose piece is that those people that inspired you actually stood for something? It was very clear what they stood for.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think, I knew what, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and John F. Kennedy stood for. Again, trying to decipher what that meant at a young age was probably, I was literally too immature to understand what all of those things meant. But there was something in there that I could tell was big. and that was really important, and that was worthy of further exploration. And so, it was always, about trying to find ways to help other people. And I think, one of the things that we did again, early on, I was 17 years old when I pledged my fraternity. But I think, one of the things that we were doing was, Toys for Tots, taking people to the polls, to older people to the polls to vote, things that were about, service. And the fraternity is actually around service, but it was doing those types of things that gave me so much joy and fulfillment. It was different fulfillment, than making a touchdown or, shooting a basket to end the game. But that's why I've talked about this combination of things that I've done, and using that combination to, again, paint a picture for other people, to help them help themselves, and effectively using my voice as their voice. So I do a lot of listening to people and channel that back through my experiences to help them think through their stuff, using me as a sounding board with experience to say, well, this is what we did, in South Africa, or this is what we did in Hong Kong. So people can kind of go, oh, okay, I get it. Right. So I'm taking what they give me and feeding it back in their voice. And so I think, again, over time, all of these experiences, and again, far more failures than success, have really helped me to understand and relate to people. I always say I want to talk to people where they are. Forget school and all this other. I want to talk to people where they are. I want to reach them where they are, and that's the most important connection I can make.
And I think based on what you've been saying to us, obviously with your getting clearer on your purpose, on on probably the sense of self at a fairly young age compared to a lot of people, what would you say to somebody who's still scratching their head and trying to find what their purpose is? Where does their purpose lie? Because that's a big issue really that we see with a lot of people.
Yeah, look. I think people probably have their purpose. They just haven't articulated it to themselves yet. If you think about, if you ask somebody, what do they like doing? What makes them happiest? What makes them most fulfilled? It may not be the thing, but it's the process around the thing. So I write music, although I've been very slack in doing that, but that makes me incredibly happy. Now, what makes me happy is the end product, but writing the music is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done, other than, writing my books or articles. I get short of fulfillment in that, but it's the process of thinking and exploring ideas and being able to look at a way in which to say something that is interesting, or noteworthy. So it's finding out where that fulfillment comes from, and then kind of branching out and finding out, well, what surrounds that thing? What surrounds, so you like going to see music, you like going to see live concerts. Well, what's it about that? What does it make you feel? So I think when people are able to almost uncouple all of those things, they probably will be able to understand and distill what their purpose is from that.
And the fear barrier that says, I love this, but I could never do it.
Absolutely. And they can, though. I mean, do you want to be a AFL footballer, who plays for the Tigers, although the Western Bulldogs is a better club? Do you want to do that? And what's the likelihood of that happening? You may not at, 45 become, a footballer for the Western Bulldogs, but could you be a supporter? Could you coach kids and find fulfillment through that? Could you be a part of the club? Could you be a part of, the VFL club? I mean, there are ways in which that you can still be fulfilled when you distill, this notion of, I want to be a Western Bulldogs player, to what is it that I like about being, involved in football? Is it the camaraderie, the mateship from the players? Is the training? What is it?
It's an ethos of a gang. It's like you said, right? The AFL player piece is a bit. And I remember when I first started doing my high performance coaching, I thought, man, wouldn't it be really cool to do a professional sports team? And at the time, you think, never going to happen. But yeah, you do something, write a book, send it in, have a chat, and then you're in there doing it. And you're like, I cannot believe I am doing the thing that 5 years ago I said, wouldn't it be cool if I was doing what I'm doing right now? And life can be so full of those moments if you commit to that process.
I think that's right. And in fact, to your point, I think it's about finding what it is in there, again, because it's not necessarily being a top AFL.
Yeah, you're never going to play
player
on the field, but you can be in
Correct.
the community in a meaningful way.
Exactly.
And within those communities, you see guys who pick up the training mitts and prepare the field before and after, who carry the water. They're all part of the team and in their own way, a vital element of it. And that's the bit. It's being part of that community that is the key. I think it's a shallow ambition to want to be a great individual to do things in a great way. And I think great individuals implicitly understand teamwork and implicitly understand the interconnectedness of community. Individually successful people all by themselves, they're shooting stars and they're living in Bolivia somewhere, in fear of their lives because of everyone they stepped on to get there. So,
but no individual has been a leader, and that's the key. So you're absolutely right. If I'm the best player in whatever sport in whatever country, I alone, because I'm the best, I'm not a leader, right? Leading takes other people that support me and I support them. And so this idea of, what does it mean to be a leader? It's actually realizing, this idea of shared success. I can't do it without them, because they're the experts at what they do. I may be more of the facilitator. I often talk about, my life in music being able to influence my life as a consultant, because I look at organizations, as a score sheet. I see all of the people down the left-hand side and I see each measure across the top of what people are doing, how they're interacting, how they're resting or playing or whatever they're doing. And my role is to facilitate that music, to direct that music. And to me, that's what leading in that context means. So yeah, I think people have to realize that leading is definitely an art, but it's better to step back and allow people to be the best that they can be and help to facilitate and support that versus the one that has to step forward. I think for me, in terms of, learning from my own mistakes, it's learning that being the best leader isn't necessarily being the first through the door. It's actually, in many cases, probably many more cases, being the person that either follows everyone else or doesn't go through the door at all. I'm okay standing back and doing my thing on the side where it's more important for you to walk through those doors on your own.
And I think as the leader too, one thing that I've observed is that leadership can be any style, can be the individual's, got to be the individual's own style of approaching leadership, because the real dominant, strong, alpha type leaders, there are some people like that. But if you're not that and you try and be that, people are going to see through it straight away. You've got to show up as you might be really quiet and laid back, but you can still have the same impact as a leader.
That's the authentic piece. It's being authentic. It's recognizing who you are and what you do best, and being comfortable in your own shoes. And again, I think, I've been around a number of leaders who, because they're a woman or because they're a big person, they feel the need to have an outsized personality. And it actually isn't required. I'd much rather you be, a feminine leader, and that's okay. Or you can be a quiet, big, 6'5" dude. You don't have to be a big personality. Doesn't have to come out of someone who's actually big in size.
That's probably this whole celebrity cult and celebration of being this individual who's always in your face. It's painful. So we do ask our guests a question, Wesley, and based on what you've said in the podcast, you sound like you had your shit in a sock pretty early on anyway. But if you had the chance to tell your 15-year-old self one thing to help you through those times that were really tough or dark, the advice that would help you get from 15 to where you are now a little bit more seamlessly, what would that sage advice be?
Do what you feel. I mean, if I struggle with it now, and sometimes I have to pull myself up. My first love has always been music. And I have somehow figured that I can't do anything else with music in the background. You'll get the connection, hopefully. So I turn off the music when I'm writing, when I'm thinking, because I tend to focus on the music when it's playing. But at the end of the day, let the music play. Do what you feel, do what you love, and you'll be okay. You'll figure out, your brain will figure out how to focus on this music that you love in the background and this other thing that you're doing at the same time, right? So you got to figure out how to, as you said, kind of integrate all of these things at once, not the balance, but the integration of what you love and what you do becoming the same thing, integrating those things together.
No, that's awesome. That is sage advice, not only for your 15-year-old self, but to everyone here listening to the podcast. Wesley, thanks so much for sharing those insights. And, it's really lovely having the opportunity to talk to someone who has such breadth of experience and has the ability to have a look at things from a practical as well as an academic viewpoint. It's a rare trait, I think, to be able to look at things on both sides of that coin. You have written a book. If you want to just fill us in a little bit about the motivation and the objective of writing that book and what people can really glean from it.
Yeah. So the book is Strategy, People, and Performance. And it literally is about this alignment between a business strategy and people strategy and how that lends itself to greater performance. And again, it came out of this idea that, I wonder what would happen if organizations actually put together or lined up in a straight line their business strategy and their people strategy, because a lot of times those two have nothing to do with each other, or worse, they may have a business strategy, but they don't have a people strategy. And so I did some research with 75 different companies and focused on this idea of, let's understand what the business strategy is, what the people strategy is, and see to what degree they are aligned. And as I thought, those companies in which they were aligned performed better. And those companies in which they weren't aligned didn't perform nearly as well. And I think what was so interesting is that you could have this great business strategy and a great people strategy, but if they're not aligned, you don't perform as if those two things are great. You can literally have a poor business strategy and a poor people strategy, but to the extent that they're aligned, it performs better than those companies that have, again, those two things that are big but unaligned. So anyway, it was an incredible amount of data. So I use all these crazy statistical methodologies.
I love statistics. Statistics are so good.
Well, me too.
Yeah.
It's probably too much. But I was able to have some really significant findings that I still use to this day.
That's awesome. If you're looking for a good read and you are a leader and you are particularly of a complex organization, reach out onto Amazon.com, usually the best place to buy anything made of paper. It's called Strategy, People, and Performance. The author is Wesley Payne McClendon. Wesley, thanks so much. You're also a speaker on the circuit internationally here in Australia. If you're looking for Wesley, reach out to our partners at icmi.com.au. Thanks, Sean. You got anything to add, mate?
What a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time, Wesley. And, I always learn something new whenever we have another guest on, a new perspective, a new way of, describing something. Really, really enjoyed the conversation today. So thank you.
I really appreciate the time. And you probably can't see, but I'm blushing.
I can see it.
Oh, fair enough. All right. Yeah.
Thanks, Wesley. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks,
thanks to you, our listeners. If you have any questions, any recommendations or any clarification, please reach out to Sean or myself or Wesley directly. And that wraps up another episode of The Few. Thank you to our partners, Afterburner, for team building, development and alignment. We understand now how important it is to have the right people around you. Get them on board with where you want to go. Momentum Media, the largest industry publisher in the country, connecting your business to the Australian community. ICMI, Australia's premier speaker bureau, representing the few that do fulfill their life's purpose. And finally, Sean's Inner Circle, the business coaching organisation for small and medium enterprises looking to make that next step. Thanks again for listening in and downloading today. Please leave a review on whatever platform you are currently listening to this podcast, and reach out to our partners who can help you make the transition to the few. On that note, that's it for another Few podcast. I look forward to you listening to the show next time.